This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, markets are seeing some relief today. Emerging market stocks were on course for their biggest daily gain in a decade. That's after central banks and governments further ramped up efforts to support battered markets. Now, MSCI's index of emerging market shares ended a four-day losing streak, jumping 5.4% today. South Africa's JSE was also up almost 5%, and that's after the Reserve Bank cut its interest rate by about 100 basis points. Egypt's market, on the other hand, stayed in the green zone, responding to a move by the National Bank of Egypt and Bank Ducaire to pump in about $200 million for share purchases. However, the outbreak of the virus has caused capital market losses in Egypt of over $10 billion since the beginning of March. We've seen the EGX 30 declining 29.4% so far since the start of this year. Now, also coming up on today's show, airlines in Africa are some of the worst hit casualties of the coronavirus pandemic. The New York Stock Exchange switches to electronic trading come Monday. And Madagascar's tourism sector takes a knock as the world fights the spread of the coronavirus. Well, we begin tonight's program with a look at Africa's battered travel industry. As the world continues to grapple with the rapid spread of the COVID-19 pandemic, multiple flights have been cancelled or temporarily suspended across the continent. According to the International Air Transport Association, African airlines have recorded a loss of up to $4.4 billion in revenues. That's since the pandemic surfaced last December. Jobs are also at stake in the industry as airlines struggle to cope with fallen demand. Outside Africa, Middle East airlines are heading into $7.2 billion in lost revenues. As many as 16,000 flights have been cancelled in the region since January. And of course, further cancellations are expected as governments impose restrictions. Well, let's get some more insight into Africa's aviation sector. We're joined by Kwame Owino by phone. He is the CEO at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Great to have you with us on today's show, Mr. Owino. Now, already we are hearing of airlines in countries such as the UK collapsing, of course, due to the decrease in flight demand. What is the likelihood of this happening to African airlines, given that a number of them, such as South African Airlines, Kenya Airways, are already struggling financially?
Well, I think, thank you very much. You're right that, the fragile global travel market will affect African airlines, but only some, because if you look at it, just to the north of Kenya, Ethiopian Airlines is still running services in most parts of the world, and its financial position was much, much better than South African or Kenya Airways. So obviously there's a mixed picture here, but Kenya Airways and specifically South African Airways are in even more trouble, partly because they're losing travel opportunities, and some of the reservations that were made were being cancelled. So it means that they're in a more cash-strapped position than they would, and yet they have obligations to pay for the machines that they run, so obviously, and some staff that they have as well. So those costs will burden them some more. Both economies at the same time are not in very good position. I'm talking about Kenya and South Africa. They're not in a very good position, so those governments don't have as much flexibility in terms of raising money to actually support them. But I think what this means is they'll just try as much as is possible to bide their time and hope that there's not a full-scale recession, but also at the same time that the governments are able to provide them along for a couple of months and hope that everything gets better.
Well, Mr. Owino, IATA actually estimates, as we mentioned, that African airlines recorded losses of up to $4.4 billion in revenue. That's since this virus surfaced. Now, they're calling on governments across Africa to provide loans and relief packages in areas such as taxes to save that sector. Now, what are your thoughts on whether African governments are capable of doing what they're capable of doing now to mitigate the impact, especially in the aviation sector?
Well, I think, I mean, thinking about, again, but specifically, I think the largest, the two airlines with the biggest problems are actually Kenya and South African Airlines. Ethiopian Airlines is in far better position, and I think they have results, so those results could really come in handy at this moment. These two do not have results, and actually we're losing money, and governments have made commitments to try and find strategic partners. That will not be possible in the time that's here. So obviously these countries are going to have to sink into much more debt to be able to keep these airlines afloat, hoping that it will not be too long and that they can run more efficiently in other places where flights have not been cancelled. So that's just basically, it's a wait and see, and hope that governments can help them to tide over that time. So really what they're going to do is that the contingent liabilities that, say, a government like Kenya is going to run on behalf of Kenya.
Well, many thanks to Kwame Owino there. Unfortunately, the audio wasn't quite clean, but thanks for joining us. That was Kwame Owino, CEO of the Institute of Economic Affairs. Let's move on now to South Sudan. The country's central bank is set to promote cashless transactions as part of measures to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Now, at the moment, Juba is free of the pandemic ravaging the world, but the government has introduced measures to ensure it remains unaffected. With more on this, here's CGTN's Patrick Oyet.
Most transactions in South Sudan are done using cash, but the Central Bank of South Sudan wants to change that. With increasing cases of COVID-19 reported across Africa, it fears that South Sudanese people face the risk of contracting the virus when using cash.
The switch has benefit to all stakeholders or financial institutions. It can be used for cross-border retail payments through mobiles and cards.
However, the change from cash to cashless transactions may still take some time. The Bank of South Sudan says it is consulting with commercial banks on how to roll out the products. South Sudan has suspended flights from Egypt and the United Arab Emirates over what it says are measures to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. Travel agents say the suspension of the flights is costing them money.
We are here because of the airlines. If the airlines are not operating, actually we will not be in a business. So it's our wish that this thing shall have to come to an end as soon as possible. A solution has to be found so that we'll be able to continue. Cancellation of flight means we don't have a business.
The members of the public here are now taking measures to avoid the spread of the coronavirus.
The moment Juba is safe, but we are still afraid. We are using hand sanitizers, and we are also having plans in case of any virus in this country.
South Sudan's new government is just being set up, and the World Health Organization is scaling up operations to help the new unity government fight the spread of the coronavirus. Years of civil war in South Sudan has negatively impacted on health system in the country, with hospitals struggling to manage treatable diseases such as malaria, and the fear here is that importation of coronavirus could pose a serious threat to the entire country. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
And now look at our corporate headlines today. South African Airways is set to immediately suspend all intercontinental flights until May 31st. This is in response to a government travel ban that aims to tackle the spread of the coronavirus. A total of 162 international and regional flights will be unavailable following a drop in demand and restrictions linked to the pandemic. And former Old Mutual CEO Peter Moyo has resigned from his post on the board of Nedbank Moyo has been battling with Old Mutual over his dismissal following a dispute over a conflict of interest in June 2019. Now, an agreement between Old Mutual and Nedbank allows the insurer to nominate one director to the board as long as its stake is equal to or greater than 15% in Nedbank Group. And the U.S. government has imposed anti-dumping duties on acetone exports from South Africa. This is expected to mount pressure on the extensive woes of oil and chemicals firm Sasol. Following an investigation into dumping, the U.S. enforced a 414% duty on South Africa's acetone exports. The organic compound is used as a solvent in the manufacturing of plastics and synthetic fibers. And finally, Netflix and YouTube are expected to switch off high-definition streaming in Europe. This comes after the European Union asked the firms to assist in curbing a potential internet gridlock as everyone stays home. This, of course, will lead to a downgrade to less sharp images for streamers. The Commission acted after network operators, including Vodafone and Deutsche Telekom, reported spikes in online traffic. And that is a look at our corporate headlines. Well, let's head into a short break now, still to come. We'll be looking at how Uganda plans to keep the country clear of the coronavirus. And tough times lie ahead for Nigeria's economy.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Naidoo.
Hello, Nairobi.
This is how whole stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. Well, let's head to Uganda now. The country is seeking to secure a loan of $190 million from the World Bank with the aim of cushioning the economy from the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. Now, the government is also expected to approach the International Monetary Fund for assistance regarding the projected decline in foreign exchange reserves. Uganda's imports face a decline estimated at 44% as a result of the economic upheaval from the outbreak. The disruption will slash industrial output, tourism earnings, as well as tax collections, leading to a cut in economic growth forecast to 5.2%. Well, let's find out more about the situation on the ground. We're joined by CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga in Kampala. Hilary, great to have you on the show with us today. Now, the reality is Uganda is yet to record a case of the coronavirus. But as we mentioned there, the government still says the economy will be impacted. That's why it's seeking out a loan. How much of an impact is the virus really having on the country's economic activity right now?
Yes, the biggest impact is on the service sector. Because of the travel restrictions, these travel restrictions are already affecting the tourism sector. That includes hotels, accommodation, and transportation. Tourism is one of Uganda's top foreign exchange earner. The country earns about $1.6 billion in tourism every year. And most tourists come from countries that are on a lockdown. This means that there is loss of jobs and the loss of income and loss of jobs for the locals here. So trade is one of the areas that has been disrupted because of travel restrictions. People cannot import and export goods. Majority of Ugandans import goods from Asian countries which are on the lockdown. This means there will be low revenue collections, which is creating a shortfall.
And on that note, Hilary, the state, as you mentioned, is already facing a financing gap of about $100 million this fiscal year, and that's partly due to that locust invasion. As you mentioned, there's going to be a revenue collection shortfall going forward. How ready then is Uganda's government to handle a confirmed case?
Yes, in case of a confirmed case, the government has already indicated that it has plans to seek a budget support loan worth $190 million from the World Bank. But they are also looking at seeking for more support from the International Monetary Fund to help stabilize the exchange rate. They hope that this kind of support will help meet additional expenditure that is needed to deal with the challenges in the health sector.
Well, what is Uganda's private sector doing to sort of complement the efforts of the government? We know the corporate sector did meet on Wednesday to discuss their strategy to help fight coronavirus. So how do they plan to complement the state's efforts in combating this virus?
Yes, the corporate sector, they have just met recently, and the corporate sector promised to provide like call centers that will help health workers disseminate information about coronavirus to the population. They have also indicated that they will be helping to transport medical supplies where they are much needed in case there is a breakout of coronavirus in the country. And they are also looking at providing shelters for quarantine in case of confirmed COVID-19 case. Those are some of the areas they are looking at to provide in terms of logistical support to the government as it tries to contain or to keep away the spread of the virus into the country.
Well, we'll certainly keep watching the situation on ground. Many thanks for that update, Hilary. That's Hilary Ayesiga joining us there in Kampala. Well, let's move on now. The South African Reserve Bank's decision to cut rates by 100 basis points has been applauded by many in the country. However, it is doing little to calm the markets as concerns over the impact of COVID-19 grows. Now, economists also argue that the Apex Bank will have to go further than its biggest interest rate cut in more than a decade in order to support South Africa's already struggling economy. Here's CGTN Sumitra Naidu with more.
It was a bold move by the Reserve Bank. The lower interest rate will provide some much-needed relief to a seriously battered economy.
The reduction in 100 basis points is quite timely and will provide much necessary relief to consumers, particularly consumers who have credit, who have loans and who have mortgages, to ensure that the cost of that debt becomes increasingly cheaper in a time when the economy is not growing.
But will it be enough? South Africans are heavily indebted and have had to contend with rising costs. The massive economic impact of COVID-19 is yet to be calculated, but the costs thereof are mounting.
In the third quarter and the fourth quarter of this year, there is a possibility of other 25 basis point reduction, which is about 50 basis points reduction for the rest of the year. And of course, in 2021 as well, another 25% basis point reduction. So that 100 basis point reduction was really, I think, giving them space to be able to conduct further reductions in the event that there's a need to do so later on in the year.
We have a lot more room to bring interest rates down than most other countries. So I think it will help quite a bit. Obviously, it needs supplementary help from fiscal policy, tax cuts and spending and so on. But at least we're getting something done in the right direction now.
There's no doubt that this rate cut will provide some much needed relief, but it's definitely not the fix that this economy needs right now, especially with the spread of COVID-19.
If you have an instance where you're injecting a lot of capital into the marketplace and you're hit by a pandemic such as COVID-19, it means that there will be a lot of capital but low demand or low spending in the marketplace.
But ultimately, I think they're probably going to have to provide buying of government bonds so that government can spend a bit. It seems to be being done everywhere in the world. And if it's a coordinated effort between all the countries in the world, I don't think it will have an impact on our currency or our inflation at this moment in time.
Government says it is looking at ways of assisting consumers and businesses, but no announcements have been made thus far, and it's not clear whether the Reserve Bank will consider pumping liquidity into the economy. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, let's head to Nigeria now, where the economy is really going through tough times following the COVID-19 outbreak and, of course, a major drop in global oil prices. Now, experts are saying the government may need to do more to strengthen the economy and prevent a possible recession. Our correspondent, Phil Ihaza, reports from the nation's capital, Abuja.
This digital printing business in Abuja is run by Uloma Ogbonna. Although it's rather busy here today, Uloma says she may be out of business anytime from now as the cost of production is gradually becoming unsustainable.
If we cannot afford to buy our materials for printing, we will not be able to continue to run as a business. So we're praying that government looks into this as soon as possible and does something, brings out measures to contain this while they still can.
Nigeria's economy depends largely on earnings from oil exports. But since the outbreak of coronavirus, global demand for oil has dropped and prices are at record lows. This has dealt a big blow to Nigeria's currency, the naira. The government has had to rely on spending its foreign reserves to sustain the economy. The Central Bank of Nigeria says it may soon be forced to devalue the naira before the country exhausts its reserves. Experts say a devaluation of the naira may spell doom for the country's economy.
I don't think Naira should be devalued in any way. Nigeria is not an exporting country. Nigeria is a net importer of manufactured goods. But we import anyway, and when they import, they will still sell to the population, and this would lead to inflation. It doesn't make sense. I don't think government should follow that path. CBN should not yield to the pressure.
The central bank has announced a $2.7 billion intervention fund to support various sectors of the economy, including small and medium-scale enterprises. But experts say the government will need to take drastic steps in order to cushion the effect of these tough economic times.
There are three things we could do. First of all is to raise interest rates and for CBN to intervene. 50% of the CBN to intervene, raise interest rates so that we are covered on short term. On medium term, we need to do fiscal adjustment. Fiscal adjustment in the sense that monies were actually going to subsidy. There's no need for subsidy again because global oil prices is down. Take that money, use it to support what is coming from foreign reserve so that Naira is further protected. Long term is diversification.
President Muhammadu Buhari has stressed that his administration would explore all alternatives to protect the country's economy from slipping into a recession.
The hope is that measures taken by the government and the central bank will help shield Nigeria's economy from recession while the world battles to contain the spread of coronavirus. But with no end in sight to the crisis, interventions may not be able to protect citizens and businesses from an economic crunch. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Well, still in Nigeria, the government has reduced the pump price of a litre of petrol from 145 naira to 130 naira, which of course is around 35 US cents. It now says the decision followed the huge drop in global oil prices. Nigeria imports most of its fuel, which it consumes domestically, and any changes in global oil prices affect the prices at home. CGTN's Deji Badmus has more on that story.
For many Nigerians, this is some good news at a time when there isn't much to cheer about the Nigerian economy. With the continued spread of COVID-19, international crude oil prices have slumped to below $30 per barrel. This has triggered fears of a possible economic recession in Nigeria, where earnings from oil exports power the economy. The government has now decided Nigerians should pay less for petrol.
As a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, you are all aware that oil prices have drastically dropped. And we know that this really will translate to a lot of sufferings on the part of Nigerians. Therefore, the President has graciously approved that the pump price of petrol should also accordingly drop. So the pump price of petrol will be from now 125 for now. If there is any further drop, it will even drop further.
On the streets, people have welcomed the news. However, not all the filling stations in the country have complied with the new price directive.
So now you can use 1,000 and buy food. I can take you to a distance and come back. So it's a good development. We love it so much.
I was happy. I was jumping up, hoping that by now I'll be buying it at a lower rate. But I just bought the fuel now. It's still the same.
You know, the marketers, the problem with them is if the price goes up, they will change it immediately. If it comes down, they will not adjust it. They are telling us that it's a oil price, is blah, blah. So they are not selling like that now.
Nigeria spends hundreds of millions of dollars every year on petrol subsidies. The subsidies estimate for this year is over $2 billion. But the drastic drop in global crude oil prices has literally wiped that off, which is why the government chose to slash the price of petrol at the pump.
This is a golden opportunity for federal government to completely remove fuel subsidy. Nigeria spends over ₦1 trillion annually on fuel subsidy. And I'm not surprised that government is saying it's reducing 2020 budget by approximately 1.5 trillion per day, an amount that is equivalent to what we would have spent on subsidy.
Petrol subsidy is more of a political issue in Nigeria than an economic one. No government has been able to muster the political will to end it. And despite the current price reduction, it's very unlikely this government will go all the way to remove it completely. But while the public enjoys the new price regime, it should be ready for an upward review once the global price of crude begins to go up. Deji Badmus, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
You are watching Global Business Africa. Let's take a quick break now, but still to come on the show. The New York Stock Exchange switches to electronic trading come Monday. And this app offers incentives to encourage recycling in Jakarta.
No one again, he can hold in guns. Machine guns from police forces toward the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time? Not at all.
The Excellency, thank you very much for your time. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
Economic data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed.
And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
I'm Uche Okoronkwo reporting from Nairobi City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is high risk.
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
And just about 5:30, let's recap today's top headlines. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization has warned that the desert locust invasion in East Africa is still creating widespread destruction. Now, FAO has been helping the Ethiopian government scale up aerial spraying targeting the pests. The organization says the situation is especially serious in Ethiopia, Somalia, and Kenya, where a new breeding cycle is currently in progress. And South Africa's Airways has suspended all international flights until the end of May. This is in an effort to curb the spread of COVID-19. The national carrier says the pandemic and travel restrictions have resulted in a substantial decline in demand for air travel. And finally, U.S. President Donald Trump has been criticized for repeatedly referring to the coronavirus as the Chinese virus. Now, Trump's new labeling came as China and the U.S. traded blame over the origins of the pandemic, ignoring World Health Organization warnings not to link the pathogen to a particular area or community in order to avoid discrimination or stigmatization. And that is a recap of today's top headlines. Now, the New York Stock Exchange is temporarily closing trading floors and moving to fully electronic trading next week in order to prevent the spread of COVID-19. The move comes after a member of the New York Stock Exchange trading floor community and an employee of the exchange tested positive for the virus. Here's CGTN's John Terrett with more on this.
The story of the New York Stock Exchange, this historic venue closing, is that 2 people tested positive for COVID-19 this week, one working in the offices above the trading floor and the other visiting the trading floor fairly regularly, we are told. Now, doctors have been stationed on the doors all this week taking people's temperature, and it was a result of that they were able to spot 2 people had a temperature. They referred them for formal testing, and that's how we know 2 people are ill now with COVID-19. As a result, this historic trading floor will close its doors at the end of trading on the Friday session. And on Monday, when it reopens, it will be all electronic, just like the NASDAQ. Now, there are 3 participants who take part in this market every day. One of them is called the designated market maker. That's a human position, a check and balance, if you will, particularly important at the open and the close. Well, that position is going to be eliminated. Computers will do the job from now on. Now, there's been trading at this site since the 20th of April 1903, and although it's unusual, it's not unheard of for this market to close. It happened in 1977 when there was a New York-wide electricity blackout, in 85 during Hurricane Gloria, in 01 for 9/11/2001, and in 2012 during Hurricane Sandy. Now, this is the last open outcry stock trading pit in the world. It's not really open outcry, but you understand what I mean. The human element here is respected and appreciated. Now, will it return? The stock exchange says it's only temporary. But we don't know how long people will be away from this trading floor. And you know what life is like. Once you move on, you get a new job, things change. It is possible we may not see trading on this floor again. Stock Exchange says no, you will, but we'll have to wait and see. John Terrett, CGTN, on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange.
Now, as the coronavirus pandemic expands across the world, multinational companies are feeling the pinch. As factories are closing, supply chains are disrupted, transportation halted, and market demand shattered. While CGTN's Zhang Yunfeng talks to the CEO of the renowned Italian tire maker Pirelli, which of course is headquartered in Milan, the epicenter of Europe.
Milan has never been so quiet for decades. The Lombardy capital was the first to be locked down on March 8th. The cost is hefty, considering the city is the beating heart of the Italian economy, the fashion capital of Europe, home to the Italian Stock Exchange and global business success stories such as Giorgio Armani and Pirelli. The CEO of Pirelli, a world-leading high-value tire producer, says some of its factories have to be shut down.
To protect our people, we introduced immediately smart working starting 2 weeks ago. In the factories, we started controlling temperature and distances between people and gloves. That was the beginning. Then the slowdown of the factories became mandatory because markets started going down, and we shut down some plants and some others were slowed down.
Virus cases are showing no sign of slowing across Italy, Spain, Germany, France, the UK and the US. Many are Pirelli's manufacturing bases and crucial markets. Pirelli has 19 factories in 12 countries and 16,000 sale points in over 160 countries. Moreover, as a premium tire brand, it takes part in as many as 460 racing events, including the Formula One, most of which are either already or expected to be delayed or cancelled. A difficult year of 2020 looks inevitable.
We as producers of tires, we have 75% of our sales that in the aftermarket, so we will have lower level of damages. It will be a very difficult year, but we are implementing cost cutting, reducing investments, and making efficiencies. We are also learning a lot. This crisis will make us coming out of it stronger and in a better shape.
China, as one of Pirelli's key markets, saw its February car sales tumble 80% than a year ago. But as many regions' new virus cases dropped to zero, sales numbers in March are looking much better. The Pirelli CEO says China's improving situation has helped with their sales and, more importantly, regaining confidence.
Chinese experience is helping us in implementing faster and better the actions. In China, we see now that there is a recovery. Things are getting better and better in a sound way. There is not an immediate rebound of the market, but there is a sound, continuous growth, which is extremely positive.
The coronavirus pandemic has clearly become an unprecedented business risk in the modern history for multinational companies who are exposed to multiple levels of risks. But at the same time, it's also a learning curve for these global companies that only those who invest in strategic resilience in operations and finance can be well positioned to respond and to recover. Zheng Jufeng, CGTN.
At the same time, British nationals are suffering from the impact brought on by the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Many would rather stay at home than enjoy their spare time outside in a restaurant or a cafe, even though the government hasn't closed those venues just yet. Well, CGTN's Nicole Johnston gives us a picture of what's happening on ground.
These are worrying days for Ricardo Pimenta. He manages 150 staff and 4 restaurants in East London. This week he closed one of them and reduced opening hours at the others. But there are almost no customers. How is the mental strain for you?
Really hard. It's hard, very, very hard. I have family and I have a team to look after as well, because every morning I wake up in the morning, see the bookings, see cancellations.
This week the British government told people to stop going to bars and restaurants, but it didn't order them to close. It also announced almost $400 billion worth of loans for struggling businesses. But Pimenta says it's not enough and they need grants and a total tax break.
We need help, no loans. We really need help in terms of, everything. Help in terms of my staff.
In central London, the theatre district closed after the government urged people to stop going. And tens of thousands of self-employed actors and artists are out of a job. It's a confusing picture on London's high streets. Some restaurants and pubs are open, others are closed. But they all say that this week business is down by around 90%. Managers are talking to banks about how to save their business. But the fear is that even with government help, many of them won't survive. The construction industry is fearing the same. Thomas has been a painter for 25 years and says business has dropped by half. The government has announced people affected by coronavirus can stop paying their mortgage for 3 months, and that renters will be protected from eviction.
I'm self-employed. If I have to have time off, I don't get paid. All these other painters down here don't get paid. So if we have to have time off, who's going to pay my rent? Who's going to pay the mortgage? Who's going to buy me food?
This restaurant owner has 21 part-time staff. He says people can't live on the government's $108 a week statutory sick pay for people self-isolating.
It's never going to be enough to pay the bills, look after the families, buy enough food, it's a very little money to be able to support a household.
Inside, the losses are growing. There are staff and supplies to pay, while every day London moves one step closer to locking down. Nicole Johnston, CGTN, London.
Now, Germany is the 5th most affected country globally, with close to 13,000 people infected. The government there has imposed strict measures, including the early closure of bars, restaurants, and the beer gardens that are so beloved in the southern state of Bavaria. From Munich, CGTN's Natalie Carney looks at the beer economics of COVID-19.
In normal times, the Hofbräuhaus in the heart of Munich is bustling at all hours. Rooted in traditional Bavarian culture dating back to the 1500s, it is considered one of the world's most famous taverns for both locals and tourists alike. Yet tonight, the very final pint of beer is being poured ahead of a 2-week shutdown due to COVID-19. Dien Gosp is the head server for the last evening.
This is an extraordinary situation. For the first time in 100 years, we have to close. It has never happened, not even in the Second World War.
These Hofbräuhaus regulars have been coming to the tavern for over 40 years.
For me personally, it is of course very hard because I have my own regular weekly table over there that I can no longer attend. It is very bitter to experience a situation that we were not even faced with during the war. Even during the First and Second World Wars, the Hofbräuhaus was open. I know from stories from my parents.
The empty halls and tables of this 3,500-seat, 3-floor tavern shows the scale of the impact.
Beer is a quintessential component of the Bavarian lifestyle. Here, unlike other parts of Germany and the world, it is considered a food and can be consumed at any part of the day. Closing down one of the state's most popular beer houses shows just how significant the country's precautionary measures are.
The Bavarian government has stepped in with a €10 billion rescue package to ensure workers affected by the closures continue to receive their salaries. But the overall hit to revenues is hard to assess at this point.
We lost 95% of sales in the 4 weeks since the crisis began.
While the general consumption of beer is going down across Germany, more than 8.5 billion litres were purchased in 2019, much of it bought at restaurants, pubs and beer gardens. Now, under federal regulations, all must be closed by 3 p.m. and before that, patrons must sit a table away from each other.
It's a big impact, especially it's coming spring, it's going to summer. People want to go outside, and especially here in Munich, I think there are these beer garden, whatever. So it's a big impact for them, yes, definitely.
It's incredibly difficult here because Munich is such a lively city, especially the Hofbräuhaus. It's the place where you just celebrate and connect, whether you're with friends or not.
Borders, schools, shops, libraries, church services, football games, even playgrounds have all been closed across Germany in an effort to stop the spread of the coronavirus. In Bavaria, the municipality of Mitterteich has also been locked down as the number of infected people in the state alone rises to around 2,000. Yet not all beer sales will be affected. Supermarkets will remain open during this sensitive period. Natalie Carney for CGTN in Munich.
And elsewhere, an app is helping residents of the Indonesian capital to deal with their waste. The platform offers monetary incentives to people who hand in their waste, especially single-use plastics, which are then turned into plastic pellets for reuse by factories. Here's CGTN's Silkina Al-Hulwalia explaining.
As a shop owner, recycling was a bothersome chore for Lily. Most of her waste would go unnoticed for days until she started using e-recycle, a newly developed app that aims to offer a practical solution to plastic waste. Residents like Lily are able to trade their trash for cash.
I realize now that my waste has economic value. My small shop generates a lot of trash like plastic bottles, so this app has helped me be more responsible in terms of recycling them.
Now Lily is able to gather her single-use plastics and have them easily picked up daily. Jakarta alone produces at least 7,000 tons of waste per day. Indonesia produces more than 60 million tons of plastic waste each year, 3 million of which ends up in the ocean. Those numbers prove that Indonesia still needs better waste management programs. There are no disposal systems in many parts of the country, and that eventually leads to illegal dumping. Those concerns led Dicky to launch the recycling app. For now, the company only accepts plastic and glass bottles, including its components, but that's already enough to help reduce waste in the city.
The journey of the waste from the first producer of the waste to the recycler is not working well. So we feel that we have to do something. And we want to ask people and educate people to join with this recycling process. And also we want to create new social economy through waste. And we can make prosperity through waste.
Jakarta's largest landfill is already reaching its maximum capacity with nearly 50 million tons of waste. Apps like eRecycle helps residents to change their waste management habits and encourage them to be more environmentally conscious. Sulkina Aluwalia, CGTN, Jakarta.
Well, on that note, let's take a look at how commodities performed today. Oil prices actually climbing above $30 a barrel today, but then they fell back slightly. We saw Brent crude falling back below $30 a barrel. Now, they are responding to stimulus measures from central banks, as well as a hint from U.S. President Donald Trump that he may intervene in the price war between Saudi Arabia and Russia. Meanwhile, gold prices rising over 1% today as safe haven buying offset a rush for cash. Traders are saying that gold continues to maintain its safe haven properties. However, with deep fears of an impending coronavirus-induced recession, investors are flocking to cash as well as treasuries and the dollar. And of course, they're shedding some of those gold holdings in order to cover margin calls. Well, let's take a short break now. Still to come after this. Madagascar's tourism sector takes a knock as the world fights the spread of the coronavirus.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN. See the difference.
Now, with the global outbreak of the coronavirus and, of course, the travel bans that have been implemented, various business dependent on Madagascar's tourism sector are now facing a tough economic burden. There has been a sharp decline in tourist visits in regions dependent on the sector to generate an income. As CGTN's Noel Mwakugo explains, life on the beach is rocky.
On the unsullied island of the northwest coast of Madagascar, residents brace for disaster Only this time, it's not the coronavirus pandemic. There's been a decline in the number of tourists visiting the island of NYSE, which is famous for its orchids and the turquoise turtle-filled waters.
Today, this is what we're preparing for lunch, but tomorrow, we might not have customers.
The downturn in tourists is the latest effect of the government suspension of all flights from March 24th. With the residents of this pristine island dependent on tourism, business owners like Tato are forced to weigh the options that can save their business, like firing employees.
If there are no tourists coming here, there's no income. I try to scramble right and left to pay the employees, but if there are no customers, there's no activity. There is nothing. If there's no more tourism in NYSE, there is no more NYSE B. We are in great difficulty.
Tato has employed 7 people and serves 80 tourists on a good day. But the global coronavirus outbreak, which has not yet hit the East African island nation of Madagascar, has frozen international travel, emptying the country of its tourists. This could spell doom for many employees who depend on the sector.
I don't have enough to cultivate. I don't have a job. Sometimes I break stones, but I don't earn anything with that. I have 3 children without a father.
For the employees, if I fire them, they will have nothing to eat. If the customers come back, I can at least give them something to go to the market. But my savings will not be enough to pay the whole team for a very long time.
But tourists are also facing the impact of the recent travel ban that is set to come into effect following the coronavirus outbreak.
We have to stay here until April 3rd anyway. Continue to discover the island, maybe other things, people too. We don't have time to do everything, and if it's in a rush, it's not very cool.
Madagascar is already one of the world's poorest nations, with people surviving on less than $2 a day. With a steep rise in prices for basic commodities and a decline in tourists, many residents face a tough economic burden. Nolma Kugu, CGTN.
Well, before we go, let's check in on Africa's currencies today. Kenya's shilling fell to a new 4.5-year low, extending its weakening streak, and that's on the back of persistent worries about the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on export earnings in the country. Meanwhile, South Africa's rand firmer today after the central bank sharply cut interest rates and, of course, introduced a raft of new liquidity measures in order to blunt the effects of the coronavirus pandemic on South Africa's economy. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.